Hello, everyone, and welcome to Worthy, a New Covenant podcast. It's your host, Mike Day, accompanied by our guest, Kasey, and we'll get to our last name in a minute. As we were speaking with Pastor Guy Hannum last week, a great podcast there, learning about him and all the things that he does for the church and just outside of the church. So it was an awesome time with him, but today we have Kasey. And so to start us off, just introduce yourself and what your position is at the church.
My name is Kasey Selvanayagam, and I am officially the student pastor and the media director here at the church. So I do all things 7th grade to really up to college, and then I do all things related to the media. But that mostly is focused on like the social media aspect of things, the website, and then just whatever else needs to be done around here. So I work pretty much part-time in the office, and so I do all things from just keeping up to who's here on Sunday and just making sure that our church members, if somebody's missing, we know that they're missing and can just check on them. So I do all of those things.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know that you do a lot of things at New Covenant, and I know we're very appreciative of that. Now that she's introduced herself, she said her last name, so now y'all know why I didn't say it, because I couldn't even attempt to try. But previously that we started this podcast, if you're comfortable with me sharing this,
yes,
she just told me that, well, first off, you're married.
Yes.
And how long have you been married?
Okay.
Did I just put you on the spot?
4 years. It'll be 4 years in June. So we got married like right at the end of COVID, everything opening back up, and so I just have to do the math. 2021. June.
So 4 years, 2021, and she just told me that she just found out how to say her own last name. So just a couple minutes. Can you just explain that to people? How that came about?
Well, I always have just pronounced it Selvanayagam because that's just easiest to say. And then I was listening to my husband say it one day, and I'm like, why does he say his last name like that? And I was like, does he pronounce it wrong? But no, I realized the whole time I had missed an A. But I will have you know, I can spell it. I can spell it correctly.
So we can spell your last name, just hard to say.
Yeah, but I can't. If you stop me in the middle, the worst is over the phone, because there's a lot of letters that sound similar to different letters, and it takes 10 minutes over the phone to when I call a hospital or to make an appointment. That's not fun.
Yeah. The cool thing is that you can joke about it, because there's some that are like, you didn't say my last name right, and it's like, well, I'm sorry,
Yes.
So it's cool that you're just kind of mellow about it. But okay, so I didn't know you were media. I should have said that, media director. But what did you do before ministry? Let's talk about that. So you're obviously in youth ministry, but what did you do before that?
Well, really before that, I was in high school and I got saved, started coming to church here at New Covenant, and really like it's like fresh out of getting saved. I just started just serving here at the church, and I had went to a ramp conference and those types of things, and the Lord spoke to me at that conference I just looked over and I saw a group of girls, and the Lord spoke to me when I saw those girls. At that point, they were probably like 5th or 6th grade, and the Lord just spoke to me, and he told me, be who you needed when you were their age. And so, really, like, I came straight out of high school in like an identity crisis because I didn't know who I was. And so really before ministry, I was just a high school student working at Mix It Up with Wendy Hodge, and Jill worked there part-time, and just they were all my cousins. And so I just kind of got reined in working there with them because I needed a job as a teenager. And I just remember seeing them, just there was something different about them, and I wanted what they had. And so anyway, me working that high school job, like I believe firmly if I wouldn't have been there as even a 15-year-old girl, that I wouldn't be sitting here today, And so the Lord, I just love just the path that he leads us all on. So I don't even know if that answered your question. I was just a high school student.
That's good. So that does answer, because I didn't know that you were in high school before. Did you start out as a? How did it come about?
Yes.
What did you first start doing?
Yes. So, when I was in high school, I was in and out of a youth group, but I really didn't know the Lord. And I would say I probably was saved. Like, I believed in Jesus. I didn't want to go to hell, but like I did not have a relationship with God, and I didn't know that was possible. And so, fast forward, like I graduate high school, I have like this identity crisis because everything that I had known, like high school friends, just the things I was involved in high school, like they weren't there anymore. And so I remember like coming to this place where like I was in college, at community college. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I had made up this scenario that would be good and I would make good money, but it was something that just sounded good. It wasn't something I was passionate about. And so one night at Mix It Up, my job, I heard my cousins just talking about the Lord. And it was so beautiful to me. Val might have even been there. It was so beautiful to me the way that they talked about the Lord. And I was just like, I want to know God in that way. Like, I want to know the God of like the supernatural that gives you peace and all those things. And I remember going home that night and I could not sleep, just turned on some worship music. And literally, like, I heard the Lord speak to me audibly. It scared me so bad. And people always ask me, like, what did it sound like? And I was like, it was like a really loud whisper. And so, like, he spoke to me in that moment, and it scared me so bad. But the beautiful thing about the Lord is he took me back to a moment, probably at least a year or 2 years before, where Wendy had prayed for me that I wouldn't be afraid when, I had an encounter with God. In that moment, the Lord brought back that prayer and I wasn't afraid. And so, but then my flesh wants to be like, was that really God? Was that just me? Like my mom did? Was that my mom? But no, I then like opened up my old little teenage Bible and that was all dusty and stuff that I had like some pressed flowers in because I didn't use it. And so I opened it up and literally right there, it was like a little, what are those things? The devotional on the corner. The first thing that I looked at, it said, prayer is more about just talking to God. It's about, hearing him speak to us. Mm-hmm. And that like hit me like so deep. And then I was like, that might have been a coincidence. And I opened the Bible again in Psalms, and it's Psalms 1 something, but the first verse of that psalm was, "Speak to me, O Lord." And so like that, it just like hit me, and I was like, oh my gosh, God is real. Like he is so real. Like I encountered him in that way, and I remember for weeks, like I just would weep when I thought about like the Lord and like that encounter. And so from there, I started coming to New Covenant. I didn't go to church before that. I started coming to New Covenant. I got involved in like a young women's ministry here at the church, and just for a year just sat and I learned and let people pour into me. And then probably maybe a year and a half later was when the Lord called me into ministry. And that first started out looking like just a small Bible study of, 10, 11, 12-year-old girls meeting before they would even come to youth or Wednesday night class. So they would come early, to meet with me and then go, to youth. And so, and then from there, the Lord called me to go to ministry school. So I went to a 2-year ministry school called the Ramp School of Ministry. It's now Ramp University in Hamilton, Alabama. And when I was starting out my second year there, I was offered the job here at New Covenant as the youth pastor. So I didn't know that was, an opportunity that was going to be presented to me. But, thankful it did. And here I am, about to go into my 8th year working here at the church as the youth pastor.
That's awesome. And I think every testimony, whether that be a salvation testimony or just a story testimony, has a message. And there's something that was in my brain whenever you were talking about your story, and that is the story about Wendy. Wendy,
Mm-hmm.
she used to be the lead singer as our worship band. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not 100% sure on what else she did,
Mm-hmm.
but it's cool to see that you were reminded of Wendy's prayer. Do you really know the timeline of how long ago? It doesn't matter, but how long ago that was prior? It was a long time, or was it more recent?
It was literally probably like a year prior to that happening. When she prayed that, I was still in high school, and I had come here to some event. Matt and Alyssa Scholl were here doing a conference, some type of conference, and that was really, I think, my first time ever coming to New Covenant. And the Holy Spirit was moving in that room, and I was seeing some things I had never saw before. And so she prayed then that, I wouldn't be afraid. And at that moment, like, I wasn't afraid. I was very curious.
Yeah.
And so that it had to be at least a year, maybe a year and a half difference in between that encounter with the Lord and then Wendy praying for me, and the Holy Spirit just, reminded me of that.
Yeah, and so it's awesome, and I think that message really can hit home with us as believers when we think, I want to do something in regard, like God, you feel God telling you to do something. And then afterwards, you're just kind of like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Why did I do that? Did that even help anything?
Right.
Is what I'm doing, impacting the kingdom of God? Well, obviously, Wendy didn't know that was going to happen. So I think if anything, if we learn anything, it is that we need to answer God's call for us to do whatever He calls us to do. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I don't even know if I ever shared that with her.
Yeah, that's cool. She'll probably listen to this and be like, oh wow, God, you're good.
Yeah,
it happens like that. But all right, so we got a lot to go over. Real quick, let's just talk about your hobbies. What are some things you like to do? We even with our job and with ministry, we have to have pleasure into something that kind of we like to do.
Right.
And that don't mean we don't like to do ministry. It's just what do you like to do outside of your
Well, like, this might sound like cliche, but my favorite thing to do is literally to hang out with my husband and my daughter Shiloh. Like, just yesterday we have so much going on outside of just church and ministry. We have several different like businesses and things like that. But yesterday we finally had a free day, and so I just had so much fun just hanging out with them and going to the park and just going to Walmart. But recently I have started just getting into photography and those types of things. So that's a really fun hobby that I've always enjoyed, and I've always wanted to get into that. So aside from that, I mean, I would love to sleep more, like those types of things, but
Yeah, love that. But yeah, it's good. I think the photography thing is interesting. I just don't know if I have the patience for photography,
right.
but I can see it, especially with you being the media director for the church. And sometimes, our hobbies are things we do in ministry.
Yes.
Because if you really think about the way God works, is God uses our ability to do things for His kingdom. So it really makes sense. But so we already covered, how did you know that ministry is what God called you to do? We kind of already went through that story. So let's just talk about youth ministry. Youth ministry is very important. Youth ministry is something, when I was, growing up, was vital to my testimony. Do you think that most of the age groups that you are around are at a pivotal time in their life?
Absolutely. That's what my husband and I, we do. He helps me alongside of me in the youth, and we just hear the youth come in every week and just kind of share just like their experiences and the things they go through every day. And it just reminds me, like, it is hard to be a teenager. It is so hard. And that's what I always tell people, like, you couldn't pay me to go back to high school. Like, they're mean there.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's not something I would ever want to have to relive. But it's funny I say that, though, because I do go back to high school all the time to minister to these teens. And so, but it's in a different way, and, I'm actually confident in myself now, and, know my purpose and all those things, so it makes a difference. But where, like, with these teens, like, I feel like the biggest struggle for them is just there's, like, a million things that are trying to pull them that are trying to take their attention. And they have, like sports, all sorts of other things. And they're not necessarily bad. The world is just so loud,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just a really pivotal time for them, because I love this quote that I heard. I don't know if I'm going to say it right, but it just talks about easier to build boys than mend men. And so I love that in just our youth ministry is just building strong boys and girls. And at that point, they're really young men and women, and especially if they come through like with kids ministry, with Jill and those types of things.
I agree with you. I think that I went through a lot of things in high school. If it wasn't for my youth pastor, I don't really know what I would really have done, because with a world situation, as us as believers, we have to see the world through a Christian sight. And when you're going through high school and something goes wrong, who's the first person I called? I didn't call my mom. I did not call my dad. I called my youth pastor.
Right.
And I think that's your role is so vital, because some people don't want to talk to their parents.
Right.
Most of them don't want to talk to their parents. They want to talk to someone else. And who's better than a youth pastor? So I completely agree. And feeding from that, I think this goes hand in hand with that. And this may be the same thing. What do you find to be the most rewarding part of youth ministry?
For me, I believe it's when these kids, when it finally clicks with them, when they take just this faith and they begin to make it their own. When it's not just them showing up on Wednesdays, they take that and home with them, and they're the same at school, at church, at home, like all these, different scenarios. And I feel like the most rewarding part is when they take this faith and they make it their own. It's not, their parents, it's not mine, it's literally them getting to know the Lord for themselves. And it's not just me telling them, hey, God is this, God is that. They have experienced the Lord, And the most rewarding part also for me is when they come back to me and they say, Kasey, I had this terrible situation that happened, and I prayed and God did this, and this is what happened. And that's like great testimony. When they come back and they share their testimonies with me, like that's how I know it's like, God's really moving in them and seeing the fruit of, just all the things. So yeah, lots of rewarding parts.
Yeah, I think the reward can be similar to, for instance, if Wendy listens to this podcast and sees what her prayer did, that's a reward.
Right.
That's rewarding, So I think that's kind of the same for all, But I know it's really difficult because you're in the youth ministry, and I think again, like I've asked previously, they are in a pivotal time in their life. But you said something earlier. I want to kind of go back to you said that you couldn't pay you to go back to high school, but you do. So explain that. Why do you go back to high school? I know you do youth, but aren't you involved in something else?
Yeah, so my husband and I started a ministry back in September called the Breakfast Club. My husband is a high school math teacher, and so the school has just told us, yes, we can have a Bible study there as long as it's before school starts. And so every Tuesday we have this Bible study. We have breakfast. We've been having women come in from the church and provide breakfast, and even some people from our church that have shared. And we've had people from, the Baptist church helping lead worship. And but we have kids who come from an array of different churches that, or maybe they don't go to church at all, but they come to school probably 30 minutes early to come and to worship and to hear about Jesus. And so we do that every Tuesday, and really it's something that the Lord put on our hearts years ago to do, or just gave us the idea, and it's just kind of been growing and growing and growing, and we just got to a place where we're like, now is the time. We have to go now. And what's so beautiful about that is we're not just like speaking to the kids. We have other teachers, we have other people, in the office, and all those people who are able to come and just set the tone for their day. And that's the thing with these kids is, I'm like, let's start our day well. Let's teach them how to, start their morning and to spend time with God. And that is not, it's not hard to like read your Bible in the morning. It's just not hard to do those things. You just have to be a little bit disciplined, and it does take discipline to get to school 30 minutes early. It's so hard for me getting there with a baby and all these other things, but it's something that I've really loved and I've grown passionate about. And it really is full circle for me to get to minister in the same hallways that I walked through as just a broken teenager. And, someone who is like anxious and depressed, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know why I was here, but it's full circle to me to go in and be like, hey, y'all, this is what God says about you. Like, you are loved, you are chosen, you are all these things. You are not what the world says about you. Like, you are not those things. And so it's rewarding. That's why I do it. And the Lord is good. And so it's been fruitful. It's been good. So,
well, that's funny that you say, I'm seeing things from an outside perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You said that, and I may be wording this completely wrong, but you said part of you knowing you wanted to be in ministry is you wanted to be someone that you didn't have in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're walking the hallways, those things, God's like, hey, remember when I called you to ministry?
Mm-hmm.
That I'm letting you do that stuff. So that's really cool. That's awesome to see from an outside view. You can see God in all that. He's letting you be somebody at school. Because this was an idea that you and Suge had for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's awesome to see God being like, this is a ministry that is going to let you be that person for those kids that you needed at that time. So that's cool.
Right.
All right, so last question, so we can close this thing out. So you're in charge of the youth at church, and I think part of you saying your reward is to see the knowledge of the Bible being applied in their everyday life, right? And so how can us as a church family, as New Covenant, but not just a New Covenant, whatever church that listeners may be going to, how can we help with youth ministry? You're obviously a youth minister, but youth ministry goes beyond just the four walls of church. So how can us as the church and as a church family impact that?
Well, I have a few ways that I thought of that really could impact these kids. The first thing that you can do is you can pray for them. Some of these kids don't have parents at home praying for them. They don't have grandparents, who know the Lord. And I'm thankful I did. I had, grandmothers who I know covered me in prayer. And that's another reason I know I'm here today. But some of these kids don't have, praying moms and dads and grandparents. So pray for these kids, pray for these parents, to, have that family altar like we talk about here at the church where, we can have that Bible study at the kitchen table with our kids, but I think just praying protection over these kids, praying just whatever the Lord lays on your heart for these kids. And the second way I would say is these kids, like I said, some of them don't have praying moms, dads, grandparents. If you see a kid and the Lord highlights one of these kids to you, here in church, adopt that child. I like to say, it's so important for us to have spiritual moms, dads, and grandparents. I would always say, Wendy and Derek were like spiritual parents to me, and Jill's like a spiritual mom to me, and like all of these other people. And I have Pastor Guy and Lenore, they're like just spiritual grandparents to me. Like, it's so important to have just people who love you and care for you and can speak truth to you. And so that's another thing that I didn't mention earlier that I did for probably about over a year. I met with Pastor Ronnie every week, and he mentored me, and I grew so much in the Lord. And so, I can't do that one-on-one with every kid in Dable,
Right.
you know. And then I'd say the last way, if you have a desire to, help with youth ministry, I have a spot for you.
Yeah.
And so the Lord has opened so many doors, and He has blessed us so much. We have an incredible youth ministry team here now at New Covenant. I did it by myself probably for about 4 years, and it was hard.
Yeah.
And so, I prayed, and the Lord opened doors. I have my husband and my friend Sierra, and I have a couple other youngsters. Peyton comes in from time to time and helps us, and that I'm taking on and trying to mentor them kids. And those are three of the main ways I could say that you could help youth ministry.
Yeah, it's difficult because, especially, I think almost can be more difficult for a youth or a young child to go to church and listen to a message or listen to what the Bible has to say, go home and see their parents do the exact opposite. And I think that the easiest way is just to live out the Bible.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know my friend, I'm not going to name names, but one of my closest friends has the hardest time seeing his dad go to church, then come home and be the exact opposite person of who he is at church. That's hard. That's super difficult to see because that's not what we're called to do. But I love it, and I it's been awesome. Yeah. I'm glad that you came on the podcast. And this is Kasey. She is our youth minister. How if someone was like, I'm listening to this podcast, I live in somewhere far away, but they want to talk to you. Is there any way they could talk to you?
Yeah, I have Facebook, Instagram. You can look up New Covenant Church Dable Facebook page, and I'm 9 times out of 10 the one that's going to answer those messages. So I'd probably go there first because you probably can't spell my last name.
Nor can she.
Yeah, I can't spell it.
She can't say
it. But yeah, you can find me there.
She's the media director, so obviously the New Covenant page is probably the easiest way. Well, do you have anything else to say for us today?
It's so funny too that you mentioned that about like being real, because I actually had 4 points instead of 3, and my last one was to just be real. And that's the best thing a church can do, is just be like authentic and live out their faith in front of all these kids. And that is so important to me in youth ministry. Like when I'm having a hard day with the youth, I literally tell them, I'm like, I've had a hard day, y'all. Like I'm struggling. I'm battling like anxiety and fear and all these things, because I want them to see, an adult that is in the middle of those things, and they're still, coming to church, and they're still up there ministering to the youth. And I'm not pretending everything's okay, because the Bible never tells us that we won't deal with anything or go through anything hard. Right. And so, but I look back on people who I thought were like really, strong, like in the church. Like I said, I didn't really grow up in church, but I knew people, and I never saw them go through anything hard. I always like, oh, their life is so great, but really, it's not. They're going through hard things too. Right. Like pastors, that like it's hard, But that's one thing with the kids that I just like to be super authentic with them and just be super real, because I want them one day when they're 29 years old to be like, my youth pastor, told me she struggled with the same thing. Right. And she got through it, and she told us how she got through it. And so I want them to be able to take those things and look back on them. And it's super important to me to be like real with these kids.
Yeah, it's easier to approach someone who's real too. If they know that you've gone through it, it's easier for them to say, hey, I'm going through the same thing.
Yes.
So that's great. I'm glad that you added that. Encourage all the parents to be involved with your youth. Show them, what living out the Bible is, and to like she said, pray over them. Even if it's not your own child, pray over someone a child that that may need it. Yeah. So that's good. Well, I'm thankful that you came on the show, and like she said, if you need her, just reach her on New Covenant Facebook page, and someone, if not her, most likely her, will reach out to
Yep.
you. And that's the same way for really anybody who's on this podcast. If you need to reach anybody that you're like, hey, I would really like to know more about anything that we talk about on here, just reach out, because Kasey could probably send you a way to talk to them or get in touch with them. So this is good. Again, I want to remind everybody that a podcast will be released every Monday. So don't wonder where it is. If you're like me and you get hooked on a podcast, you're like, I'm ready for it now. But it'll come out on Mondays. So before we close, I'll make sure there's nothing else you want to speak on.
I do have one thing to say. If you are a student, 7th grade to 12th grade in the Tallahassee County area, we would love to have you Wednesday nights. We have dinner at 5:45, class at 6:30. Come and join us. If you go to Devil High School, come and join the Breakfast Club every Tuesday at 6:45. We would love to have you there. My prayer is if you come that you'll feel so welcome, you'll feel loved and appreciated, and like you are wanted to be there, because you are.
And I love the name.
Yes.
I hope everybody who listens to this podcast knows that name. If not, look it up, because there's a movie about that. It's a really good movie as well. So, but the cool thing is this Breakfast Club is way better. So.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I hope y'all have a good week. I hope y'all enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see y'all in the next episode.